On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be bringing in Alex Slemp of Full Press NHL to discuss the Florida Panthers' two regulation losses over the weekend, as they're hoping to have different results as they ring in the new year of 2023. We're going to discuss that more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, January 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Rodent, and make sure to get your World Junior fix on Locked On NHL Prospects with Heidi Kalakash. And don't forget to also send in your screenshot of your subscription to Locked On Panthers and your 5-star rating on whichever podcast app you listen to Locked On Panthers for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Vancouver Canucks game at FLA Live Arena on January 14th. So Florida Panthers fans, like we spoke about in the very beginning of the show, right at the top, the Florida Panthers, they, after a big-time win against the Montreal Canadiens, as that game could have been a blowout early and then pulled away late. With that game, seeing it at the time, was that going to be the game for the Panthers to help them go on their run? And being on a second end of a back-to-back, even though it's not an excuse, just being blown out by the Carolina Hurricanes, and where you give up 3 power play goals, and one of them, and the even strength goal as the power play ends, and then coming right back home, ringing in the new year, and fall behind early, and you never even get this game to a tie. And this will be a great time to bring in my guest on the show. Of course, he is now a multiple-time guest on the show. He is Alex Slemp from Full Press NHL. Alex, Happy New Year, by the way, and welcome back to the show.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, it's good to be back. Man, them Panthers though. I mean, is it good to be back for them?
Yeah, it's funny because of the way everything lined up in South Florida sports with the Miami Dolphins, and just having a chance to win earlier in the day. It's just proven to be same old Dolphins, and then for the Florida Panthers, just same old Panthers as far as this season. Even though as a calendar year, the Florida Panthers just it was a great year as far as the calendar when you're talking about last season versus this season. A lot of things happened in the offseason, but man, they're just in a really rough place right now for them, and just continuing to fall behind. You get 0 points in these last 2 when you really got to go get 2/3 of the points the rest of the way to at least 700 hockey, and just come out flat against the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, listen, I mean, the amount of power play opportunities, I believe they had 5 on Friday night against the Canes, and I believe 3 of them you don't even generate a single shot on goal, and a lot, and even in the game against the Rangers on Sunday night, they had a hard time with offensive zone time on the man advantage too. So it's just looking back at just these last 2 games, it's been really special teams that's just been the continuous issue for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. It has. It broke them against the Hurricanes. It let them down once again Sunday night. And you almost get a little frustrated having to talk about it. I mean, it was a big issue at the beginning of the year. Seemed like they cleaned some of that up coming into the break. We're looking all right, and now it just looks like we're back to square one, and it's extremely frustrating if you're a Florida Panthers fan, and obviously very frustrating for the players. We saw at the end of the game some of that frustration come out. So, I mean, for the Panthers, I don't think they could have asked for a better start coming out of the break. They get a very favorable matchup, Montreal Canadiens. They take care of them the way they should have. Um, but then they follow it up with a dud, a 4-0. And I don't, for me, I don't care that that one was on a back to back. You're coming off of a week's rest. You're not tired there. Okay. You had an easy skate against the Canadians. You had the wheels to be able to go in that game, and they weren't there. And then they follow it up with an absolute dud of a first period against the Rangers here. To me, it's insanely frustrating to watch. I mean, you had this great reset with the break. You come out and you get that win. And then what do? Two back to back losses. You look just like the Panthers going into that break, now coming out of it 1-2. I mean, this was your chance to get a full reset. Um, this is very frustrating.
Yeah, and just looking back at both the shot on goal differential in both first periods, let's just talk about the first period in both of them.
Hmm.
For Carolina, just dominating the possession in the first period, 12-3, and in on Sunday, 11-2 as far as shots on goal in favor of the New York Rangers in the first 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I mean, the Panthers, they only gave up 2 shots on goal the rest of the way on Sunday, but I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky in the first period was the best player for the Panthers. I know later on in the period and on Sunday there's just that mishandling of the puck, and then it crossed up Sergei Bobrovsky right on the power play. Mika Zibanejad getting the goal, and then really the broadcast mentioned this as a really key point as far as Sunday. It's just the neutral zone, the speed through the neutral zone. And even though the New York Rangers are one of the teams in the NHL that have the hardest time finishing, they're still a very speedy hockey team. They're as far as generating goals on the forecheck, the broadcast mentioned it, how they're one of the best ones as far as generating on the forecheck and when you cycle around the puck too. So I mean, it's just really about cleaning up the speed. I mean, the Panthers took it, got some speed going in the neutral zone. I mean, Nick Cousins cut it down to a 1-goal deficit uh, because of that adjustment with the neutral zone and catching New York in that change. But it just really came down to like how they were skating through and just the continuous active sticks for New York in that one.
Yeah, no, it really looked like the Panthers were skating through mud, especially in that first period. They couldn't get any speed. They got burned by the Rangers' speed. Yeah, they were able to find their legs for the second and third period, and did a good job, I think, out chancing the Rangers, but they were just letting. I mean, the Rangers were just capitalizing on every single opportunity that they could get. Yeah, I mean, I don't. It seemed uncharacteristic because I mean we're used to seeing the Panthers have strong first periods, and outworking their opponents in the first, out shooting them, out chancing them, all that. So this was a little bit uncharacteristic play. We saw them get their legs back later in the game, but I mean it was too late for them. Uh, yeah, and to do this against a team like the Rangers, who I think have been struggling in their own right. I mean, they've got the Zibanejad line that is just always consistent, but they're having issues with some of the other young players. Lafreniere getting the demotion there. I mean, Kako still hasn't been what he's supposed to be. They're having troubles, and this is a team that we could have taken a you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, we had an opportunity to do something here against a team struggling in their own way, and and they didn't. They didn't. So
Yeah, and the noise is really loud for Gerard Gallant after even prior to the scratch of Alexis Lafreniere. I mean, it's also comes down to the Rangers realizing that the Panthers have been caught. I mean, Capo Caco had that incredible backdoor feed for one of the goals. It was to Zibanejad. I mean, Ekblad creeps up behind the net, and then Zibanejad's kept all alone. And then, of course, really what broke the straw that broke the camel's back in the the game in later in the game was a shorty chance by Anton Lundell that was broken up, and then just a counter attack going the other way,
Mhm.
and just and getting chances shorthanded. I mean, even one of their few chances that got that the Panthers had early on, it was shorthanded when they were struggling on the power play last game. You don't get chances at 5-on-5 early, and then your first chance is shorthanded. It's like this season is kind of an enigma for the Panthers. It's just hard to understand. And still, after the first period overall, just looking at this at Hockey Reference right now, they're 0-9-1 when trailing after the first period. So it's continuing on for the Panthers as far as just the starts that they're having. It's just
Mhm.
concerning. But I do want to get to segment number 2,
Mhm.
where we discuss the Panthers practice in between the Carolina game and the New York game, and talking about emphasis on special teams and what Paul Maurice worked with the Panthers, and also as a result. So we're gonna discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're gonna tell you all about Athletic Greens. And our next partner is a product that I literally use every day. And I started using AG1 because I needed a little break from the coffee. And of course, if you know South Florida culture, you know coffee runs this place. As I'm actually in South Florida right now, and I had quite a few uh, café con leches and coladas and cortaditos while I was here. But thanks to AG1, I've had sometimes a little bit of a break from it. Of course, not being in South Florida helps at times. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogen to help you start your day off right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, all the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and five free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Back on this Monday, January 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And Panthers dropped to the New York Rangers 5-3 at FLA Live Arena. We're recording this just 30 minutes after the final buzzer went off for the game. And let's talk a little bit about special teams. And even Thursday, I even mentioned on Friday's show with giving up 2 power play goals against the league's worst power play unit. You give up those 3 on Friday, and and the other one being as the power play ended for the for the opposition. And this one just continuing the special teams just being a continuous struggle, especially penalty kill, 2 for 4 for the Rangers. And it's rare on a back-to-back where, especially when the second end is on the road, where you're going straight to practice. And on New Year's Eve of all things, these players are probably thinking, oh, I get to be with my family. But Paul Maurice said no. This is a time for a sense of urgency for this team. Of course, it didn't result in a win on Sunday. But what did you think, Alex, when you first heard that the Panthers were practicing in between games after a back to back, and of course with the holiday?
Yeah, no, I was all for it. Absolutely. I mean, there's no need for them to be getting a break in a thing like this. I mean, you're I mean, this is your season right here. At this point in the year, you cannot be having these issues. You can't be trying to figure out special teams, your penalty kill, your power play. Absolutely not. So no, I don't think it deserved any sort of a break. I think it was the right call to be like, no, I mean, here, this is make or break in our season. This should have been sorted out long ago. We've got burned. We went 0 for 6 on the power play against the Canes. They allowed, was it 3 of 4 on the penalty kill, and then they got burned on Sunday night. So I mean, why? There's no reason to have a break. I think the players would expect that too. I mean, I don't think they could, you know, take a day off and say, yeah, we earned that. Absolutely not.
Mm.
And I think even after today's game, there needs to be another sense of urgency in their response, kind of having one of those Maurice ripping into the guys, and immediately after having a door closed players only meeting and air some stuff out. There's something going on in that dressing room. There's a lot of frustrations there. And to me, I think it's just something like this is make or break in their season. Their response on Tuesday against the Coyotes is going to be very, very telling as to where they want this season to go. Because after that, they're staring down the barrel of a 4-game road trip where there's a lot of travel involved. You're up in Detroit, you got Dallas, Colorado. Okay, you're moving around a lot. So for me, I think no, Marie's holding the practice, trying to figure this out was the right call. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the ESPN Plus broadcast on Friday night was talking about a little bit of the problems with the Florida Panthers penalty kill, and it's just they're too spread out with allowing too much wide open shooting lanes, and that's kind of really what's kind of been the issue, and just continuing to be caught, and listen, I've spoken so much about Aaron Ekblad about just consistently getting beat, and the goal where I believe it was Vincent Trocheck, uh, where he got it to Artemi Panarin, and just continuing to just unable to get back, creeping up on the play. We talked about the Capo Caco goal earlier, and it's just like even the top guys are having a hard time and continuously getting caught. I mean, even after the second period. I mean, the Panthers had more slot shots. The offensive zone time was the Panthers having more of it on the power play for some reason. They're it's just one and done a lot too, and most of that really came from even 5-on-5. I mean for the third period alone, I mean 5-on-5, it's Corsi 4, 21-10, and then shots for, shots against 20-4. But it's just really about what the consistent chances that you're giving away, and really on the rush, on the forecheck, and all. And listen, the New York Rangers, as I'm looking at the chart right now, and I'm just looking at how much the slot area was just really dominated. The Florida Panthers had, where as far as the darker areas, more opportunities really at the slot, but they didn't even face Shesterkin tonight. I know Yaroslav Halak has been part of 2 Jennings Trophy tandems in his career, so but still they still, but 37 years old, who's been on multiple teams, a chance to take advantage of it, and just, but it's just those silly mistakes in when they get, even when the opposition gets even a few opportunities, they're just consistently leaving their goalies to dry, and you can't put any of these last 2 games on the goaltenders. You really can't.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. That's not where I'd be going if I'm looking to pass blame. What you're talking about on the penalty kill is absolutely right, though, that they're allowing too much space there. And it's something they've got to tighten up that formation. I think these players got to be able to trust in their goalies. It like let the opposing team pass that puck around the perimeter, take perimeter shots all day, tighten up the formation, make it difficult to get pucks through the middle, and let them just skate around. You can skate around the perimeter of the ice, do stuff like that all day. Your goalies are good enough to stop those shots. They've been proving that they can. Trust in them to let it do it. And like you were saying, with Ekblad and how he's getting burned there. I mean, if you tighten it up, you don't really have to worry about him moving around so much. But you've played with all this space, and it looks like, perhaps that growing injury he sustained early in the year is still nagging, and he doesn't have that same mobility. So if you want to keep Ekblad out on that unit, you got to tighten it up. And if you And if you don't want to do that, if you don't like that type of formation, then you got to get Ekblad out of there and you got to try in with someone else because it's just not working right now. I mean, it can later, but I think there's still something lingering on in there, and it's the strategy they're going with is it's getting exposed on a nightly basis.
And happening really on both sides of special teams too. I mean, not,
Yeah, oh,
go,
sorry,
go
cut
ahead.
you off there. No, but you're right with what you said with even the power play, and they're getting all these one and done chances, and that was something that Matthew Tkachuk was talking about. I remember earlier in the year when they were struggling on the power play, and it just seems like they're just reverted back to how they were at the beginning of the year. Um, so again, just frustrating for fans, frustrating for the players, but they were able to make it work. They got that power play going where they had sustained pressure, could cycle around, create chances. I think you just got to go back to the film, look at what you were doing there, and take those things and implement it again. I mean, I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's a simple fix. Just go back to what was working. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and so it's just sometimes you just even in losses you, you try to see things for what it's worth, and the two shots that they allowed for New York, but just going back to the quality of shots, the two shots that they allowed to New York, even in the last 15 minutes of the first period, one of them happened to be a goal, and then just continue it, and then talking about all the different types of penalties. You got neutral zone penalties. Eric Stahl had two penalties today. Carver Hagee had one in the offensive zone after taking a hit. I think it was Sam Bennett who took a hit up high uh, earlier in that shift, or prior to for Hagee's shift, and then he takes an offensive zone penalty. There was one of Stahl's was right behind the net in their own zone. So you're getting all types of just silly penalties and just out
oh,
of control with the stick too.
absolutely. I mean, talk about shooting yourself in the foot and making it as hard as possible on yourself as you can. That's too many offensive zone penalties. You're right. The word is silly.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what I wonder. I wonder what Maurice is going to do as far as what the next practice will be. Right now, there is no announcement of whether there is practice tomorrow. When the Florida Panthers did send their schedule as far as the week ahead, it said TBD. But after this performance, I'm going to assume that they're going to be back at FLA Live Arena or the Coral Springs, the Ice Den in Coral Springs to have a practice there, because it's a sense of urgency that is very much needed for this Panthers team. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to look ahead, and we're going to talk about the Florida Panthers welcoming in the Arizona Coyotes on Tuesday night, and we're going to just try to forecast that and the rest of and the Florida Panthers going on a West Coast trip after that. So keep it right here with myself, Armando Velez, and Alex Slemp of Full Press NHL here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Monday, January 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Alex Slemp here of Full Press NHL. So we were Alex and I were talking about this off camera the last time he was on. Since this is a Sunday night recording, I guess we could call this a Slemp Sunday, even though this is released on a Monday. Trying to have a little bit of alliteration here. So here for the show. So. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day, and thank you once again, Alex, for joining me on the show. But Alex, now every single game, every single game this time around, whether it's the Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, where they'll be seeing next week, or a rebuilding team in the Arizona Coyotes, which the Florida Panthers in only the Arizona Coyotes' second game in their new arena, Mullet Arena, when they welcomed the Panthers. Just the amount of pressure they put on Kirill Vejmelka in that game, and just I remember just talking about how the best player in early on in that game as far as generating chances was Ryan Lomberg from what I remember, and just when it comes to approaching this one, it's just like, man, this is one of your quote unquote easy games as far as your strength of schedule according to Tankathon. But Arizona's not a doormat like they were last year. It was obvious that they were trying to tank. It's kind of obvious that they're trying to this year as well. But of course, you get front offices can try, but putting coaches and players there as far as trying to put a product together, they're gonna try to they're always gonna give their hardest. And listen, the arena there over in Tempe, great energy there. Of course, this is a road game for them coming into FLA Live Arena here, but this Arizona Coyotes team definitely not a doormat. And even though they're hurting their chances of number one overall pick in Connor Bedard, who had 7 points in a World Junior game and then 6 in the other, which the quarterfinals are tomorrow, which Ludwig Janssen scored again for Team Sweden. So now he has 3 goals for the for Team Sweden in the World Juniors. Florida Panthers prospect Ludwig Janssen. But how are you looking at this game, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, well, hey, I would love to see Connor Bedard, Logan Cooley. That could be a nice little 1-2 right there in Arizona for many years to come. But you're right; these are professionals. At the end of the day, they're going out there. They're playing their hearts out. They're not looking to tank. They're going to play teams hard. Look at the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs just the other night, right? Arizona taking them out. So, yes, you're right. Strength of schedule, perhaps easy, but it's not going to come easy for the Panthers. And this, to me, is this is a must win. Absolutely. I don't think we can come out of the break and have a 3-game losing streak. Absolutely not. So, must win hockey game at home before going on the road, because then you're playing, what is it, the next 5 of 6 games are going to be against Western Conference teams, I think it is. So that's difficult to make up ground in your own standings, right? It's not easy to leapfrog when you're playing the other conference. So they need to win this game against Arizona, and then they got some stiff tests. They got Dallas, they got Colorado in there. Vegas has been playing well. I mean, these aren't easy road games, but they are must win. They have to if they're going to want to keep pace the rest of the way before they get to come home and have a bunch of games against the Eastern Conference and maybe make some leapfrog in the standings. But there is absolutely no way that they can go into this road trip and even the game against Arizona relying just on the 5-on-5 to win these games. It really comes down to special teams. They have to get that fixed now. And I mean, if that's not sorted out by Tuesday, I mean, I think we can start. I don't like to say goodbye to the season, but I mean, they're running out of time. That's just it. They're running out of time. So it's a really, really crucial stretch of games coming up for the Panthers here right now.
Yeah, and Paul Maurice even spoke about it even prior to December starting, about the month that he was worried about the most as far as the schedule was January, because of the amount of back-to-backs that the Panthers were going to have, including a matinee in Buffalo and then quickly going to Toronto, even though that's a very short trip. New York again and Pittsburgh in that trip. LA and Boston both at home, and Boston still not losing a game in regulation at home, which they'll be playing in the Winter Classic tomorrow at Fenway Park. And but going back to the Coyotes and that game, I mean, Lawson Krause, former Florida Panthers prospect, is leading the way in goals for the Arizona Coyotes. There earning his contract, and very team friendly contract at $4.3 million. Clayton Keller, a homegrown player as well, with 13 goals. Shane Gostisbehere, who's likely going to be attractive in a trade as far as the deadline. Bugstad as well, another former Panther, Nick Bugstad. He's going to increase his trade value as well. He's going to be well for a contender. And listen, Bill Armstrong, he's accumulating assets. I'm just looking at their 2024 capital. three second round picks and 4 third round picks for the Coyotes, and 2 second round picks in 2023, and then in 2025 they have 4. So they're just and let's not forget the 2024 second round pick was to get rid of the contract of Anton Stroman to buy their contract. So they're taking on the bad contracts, and I mean that specific contract of Anton Stroman was a result of the tail talent era. They're still having a bit of the repercussions from that era, as far as, like, talking about Keith Yandel's contract, Sergei Bobrovsky's contract as well, and it's Bill Zito, of course, selling a part of the farm to make this team to go for it last year. And listen, the Montreal pick is looking worse and worse for the Panthers, unprotected as well. And just how do you navigate from here when you're trying to still create a contender there? And at this point in time, my thought process is really what's going to be the message, and what's going to be spoken about when they do have that extra cap room, they spend a little bit, and they get off to a slow start next year.
Oh man, a lot to unpack in there. And I mean, if certain things unfold in a certain way, we're talking that first overall pick, you're gonna want to stay off of Twitter and all socials if Montreal was to win the lottery. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, you look at this team right now, and you wonder what Bill Zito can do. I mean, they're pressed against the cap. He's already got rid of a ton of their assets. Trying to go for it. I mean, you can't fault the guy for that. That's just the name of the business, right? I mean, when you're in your championship window, you go for it. I mean, a best case scenario, you win the cup, but I mean, that only one team gets to win it. It doesn't happen for everyone, and a lot of teams go through this where they give up a lot to try and make it happen, and it doesn't work. Zito, I imagine, has got to be very busy on the phones right now, trying to figure out what he can do. I mean, obviously, an option, and I think the most obvious one would be to find some big LTIR contract they can shell out whatever remaining asset they have for to bring it over, and then give themselves some cap flexibility, and maybe they can bring in someone else. Aside from that, I don't really know what other pieces they could move out. They have a lot of unmovable contracts for any type of player they would maybe be looking to move. Patrick Hornquist, you're not giving anyone that contract there. Bobrovsky, you're not giving anyone that contract there. So I mean, they kind of are stuck. I don't. So you just look at it, and there's not a whole lot. You think maybe they got to figure it out with this club. I don't know. I guess that'd be a question for you. Do you think the personnel on this team? Do you think that they can figure it out with them? Because there's a good chance that Bill Zito may just have his hands tied and have to go with this club. Do you think that this group of guys can figure it out?
I don't know how. I really don't know what you can add to this team outside of the LTIR guys. Like, and I'm not trying to dodge your question, I promise. But if this season spirals goes in the wrong direction, and you're looking, and I'm just looking at the Panthers cap friendly page right now as far as like contracts to move, and as far as the expiring deals, really the only trade piece you have as far as expiring deals is really Radko Gudas. He's an under 35 contract for the Panthers, and the Panthers might want to try to keep him next year. I think he's a very valuable piece to this Florida Panthers team at maybe like a 1-year deal after this season. I wouldn't sign him more than 2 years, if anything, if I'm Bill Zito. But just as far as you're not gonna, as far as like current players on the roster, you're not gonna have someone take Zach Talpe. You're not gonna get that much. You're not. Chris Tinner's still gonna have some time in the AHL as well. As far as the 35 plus, Mark Stahl, Eric Stahl, no. As far as that as well, like I'm just thinking of like what you could ship out if this spirals goes in the wrong direction too, because you gave up a lot of assets. You need to try to accumulate something back. So I think your LTIR, when you're talking about taking a contract on LTIR, I think it could be the scenario that the Panthers could go. As far as this group, I mean, man, I mean, I I can't use the whole oh, but they did it last year anymore. I just can't. It's very just thinking like that is very tiresome for me, and
Mhm.
I've kind of gotten to that point with this team. This is who they are now. This is I don't want to say a complete 180 because I still think a championship window is with bringing in Kachuk is extended, and
Mhm.
this was the step back year. But as far as
Mhm.
if we're talking about 2022, 2023 specifically, I don't have at this point in time I don't have confidence that this is a team that's going to make that run for the postseason. And they were talking about the New York Rangers in the early 90s, win the President's Trophy, miss the playoffs the very next year in 93, and then go back and win the Stanley Cup in 94. We're not at that point yet though.
Mhm.
But just a little perspective of a team that has taken that step back in their past before. I know that was like almost 30 years ago. As so just a little bit perspective of this has been done before. But
Mhm.
this year, listen, we can't even get to a 3-game winning streak without first starting with two. And this was a great weekend to do so
Mhm.
as New York when Shesterkin's not saving at 9:30, you see the flaws with the New York Rangers, and he wasn't even in the net
Yeah.
on Sunday night, and they couldn't take advantage.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think unfortunately the writing is on the wall at this point. It is a very different team than last season. I mean, last season's team was ridiculous. Like they had three lines that were operating like a first line. They could just score at will. And that was what they did. They don't have that anymore. And you're right with Matthew Kachuk. They've extended their window by getting him, but this may be one of those years where it'd be a tough pill to swallow for Zito, I think. But this could very well be like, all right, you know what? This isn't the group. I don't have the cap flexibility. I can't afford to give up any more asset. You just let this season run its course. Maybe you make the playoffs. Maybe these guys like figure it out and go on a run and do it. And maybe they don't. And you just do one of those quick 1 year rebuilds because you do still have some young core signed on for a while. So you know that you can make another run. You can afford to perhaps lose a year. And maybe that's like the route they take. And I'm not too big on speculating when there's really nothing to go off of, but I kind of look at what sort of asset can they give out, and maybe they just need it's silly to say a shakeup when they just had one of the biggest shakeups in an off season we can remember. And I don't also want to dog on a guy, so let me just get to it. But maybe it's time they take a hard look at the Ekblad contract and see what they can get from him. I know he's on that no move right now, but it's not a no move the whole way through. So they probably can't move that this year. But maybe that's something that they move away from. He's been a part of the core for ever since he came over, but maybe he's no longer part of that core going forward. Now, something for the listeners to chew on.
Mhm. It's funny because I never really entertained. I I I thought I was thinking more of that expiring towards the end because there's 3 years left, 2 years left, excuse me, after this year. And I've spoken so many times about Bobrovsky's no move clause becoming a modified no trade clause on July 1st of 2024.
Mhm.
Ekblad's is this very same day. The
There you go.
very same day. That could be the
Mark it on your
day.
calendars.
That could
Holy.
be the day of a major shakeup with the Florida Panthers. But of course, you got to evaluate what the 2023-24 season is going to be, and they're banking. They're banking with that extra cap space to make something happen for this team. They are banking on it, and
Yeah.
maybe Bill Zito thinks of it as he had an injury riddled season and didn't really recover as well from that groin. Give him another chance, and then you see what's where do we go from here?
Mhm.
Because that could be that because you're not giving him another 8-year deal. No way. I don't. No way in hell. You're not for Ekblad as
Mm-mm.
well.
No.
And so it's just the very same day. I never really looked at that until like just now. So
Mhm.
so so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that Bobrovsky contract, I mean, it's unmovable right now, but it becomes very movable come 2024. The cap is projected to go up enough, and it'll for sure be a salary retention move by Zito to do it. But you're gonna have Yandel dead cap off, and there's another I can't
Scott Darling.
Darling, his dead cap will come off. So I mean they'll be able to hold some of that for the remaining contract, and I think that'll be okay. They retain 50. They're paying 5 mil on dead. That's all right, but it will be movable, and they'll be able to do something there. Spencer Knight, I'm sure, will be ready to step into that big role. So I mean, right now, yeah, we look at it, can't move it, but you make a good point. Circle that on your calendars for 2024 because those are very movable pieces.
And a buyout would be less likely with the cap going up. That is the thing of note when it comes to all of that. So, but they got a rest of the season to play, and last game of this
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, last game of this homestand, quick 2-game homestand right before hitting 4 on the road, 2 days off prior to their game against Detroit, and then it's go time. Ready, set, go, Panthers. You got it. Time to string in some wins. Got to be desperate as far as that. And even Randy Moeller, there was a quote about sometimes you need to be a little bit selfish if you want to generate a shot. But yeah, so Alex, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this Monday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, so fullpresshockey.com. That's where you can find my articles up there, and also doing all my Twitter stuff. There's the handle. You see it on screen there at Alex Slemp, so you can get all of my work right there. So thanks again for having me on the show, Armando. I love getting on here, and I like that the Sundays with Slemp. I don't know if it quite rolls off the tongue, but I mean, I like the time slot, so
yeah,
maybe we can figure out a better name.
Yeah, well, we'll just roll with what we got, and if we need to make adjustments, we do as we will. But thank you once again, and hope to see you next time.
Looking forward to it. Have a good one.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to all the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL and Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL draft. Locked On NHL Prospects is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Alex Slemp, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.